So I guess we made it to week two. I'm recording this in week one. Um, there was some confusion about where to turn things in, and just to make clear, turn things in. Go if you go and look at the announcement for your group work. When you're communicating with each other in the group, use the class comments function to talk to each other. But when you're turning in your midweek prompts and when you're turning in your what's the other thing called? Your lecture responses, please turn them in on, I guess this is reversed, on the top right. There should be a little space where you can type stuff in and turn it in. Please turn it in there, because if you turn it in there, then it goes directly to the grade book. It's much easier to grade. Okay, so we're going to start off here looking at umi to kahahana. We're not going to look. History 284 is it's one term to cover all of Hawaiian history. It's a lot. We're gonna be skipping a lot of things that might be covered in some of the upper division courses that are split into more sort of tighter time periods. So we're not going to have time to go through, all of the Oahu chiefs and all of the Kauai chiefs and all the Hawaii chiefs. It's really good. We're going to skip right ahead to Umi. And it's going to be really Hawaii focused, Hawaii Island focused, because we're in the Hawaiian Kingdom, because they're the ones who set up the conquest. So we are going to start with Umi. Okay, let me just put this over here. So I'm just sort of in the camera. Okay, Umi. Actually, so one of the things we're going to be doing today is trying to set up what's the world Kamehameha comes into, the chiefly world, the political world. A lot of this is going to be the political side, what's happening with kings and chiefs, etc. And with Umi, the story of Umi really sets up a lot of the things that we'll see in the story of Kamehameha himself are going to be set up with Umi. And then we'll move on to Alapa'i, Kahahana, and some of the others. Reading through Kamakau and going through this lecture, I'm going to be throwing a lot of names at you really quickly. And I know some people have had trouble with this in the past, especially those not too familiar with Hawaiian language. But stick with it, and you have the slides, so you can always go through it later. All right, let's jump into this. So who is Umi? Umi is, okay. Actually, to get to Umi, we got to talk about Liloa. Liloa is the ruling chief of Waipio on the Big Island, not the one where Costco is, the one where all the lo'i are. Waipio is, it's Waipio Valley. It's, now there aren't that many people that live down there, but it is lush and green and flat on the bottom. It is wet. The soil is all this nutritious soil that's just dumped in from the mountains. You can see way over here. This is the Kohala Mountain Range. It's up here, and it just the soil is just nutrient rich. It's just, you can smell the soil when you're there. It stinks. The soil smells because there's so much material in there that's just sort of rotting material, which is perfect for growing things, right? It's just incredibly nutritious material. So if you control Waipio Valley, you can feed a lot of people, and if you can feed a lot of people, you can feed an army, and if you can feed an army, then you are an important chief, right? The land feeds the people. The people provide the chief. The chief is nothing without people. The li'i cannot exist without the maka'inana, because the maka'inana are the ones who feed them, who clothe them, who do everything. So on a political basis, having land that is lush like this, windward side lands, is key to power. So Liloa is a ruling chief, and there's much more about Liloa, but this is where we're gonna sort of jump in. Is when he's already ruling chief of Waipio. He's pretty prominent, but he doesn't control the whole island, and there's at some point he's off in the forest with his men, and kind of tells them like, "Hey, you guys, I'll come back alone. I'm just gonna split for a little while." And it seems to be like there's so much pressure when he's in Waipio Valley, when he is the chief. There are all the kapu that have to be recognized. There are all these things that are going on, and it's the political pressure of being chief. And he seems to escape for a little while, and he meets a woman named Akahi, who's, it depends. Some accounts she's a Makai Nana, and other accounts she's just she's from a lower chiefly family, Kaukauali'i. Um, and they hook up. She doesn't know who he is. She's just like, "Hey, hey, sexy man," and she's like, "Hey, sexy lady," and they have some sexy time. And when they're done, he's like, "I'm pretty sure you're pregnant now." Now it's these kind of stories, they're passed down orally, etc. But he's like, "I'm absolutely sure you're pregnant now." Um, and so he leaves her with some. How do you know absolutely? There's no pregnancy test, but in the story, he knows. He leaves her with a bunch of his ruling stuff. He leaves her with the Le Niho Palawa, the whale tooth pendant, a malo, sort of, a malo, and some of his other sort of chiefly things. And says, if it's a girl, raise her by her family and don't tell her who her father is. If it's a boy, tell him to come to me when he's of age. Which, yeah, okay. There's some gender stuff going on there, obviously. And yeah, it's a boy. She ends up, marriage isn't really the right term, but like she ends up with another guy. There's, through Hawaiian history, through most of human history, what you see is chain monogamy, where you're monogamous within a relationship until the relationship doesn't work. Then you move on, you move on, you move on. So she moves on because she's not going to have a relationship with him. He's the ruling chief of Waipio. And he split. Umi, as he's growing up, gets into it with his father a lot, his stepfather. And he's recognized as being like very good at stuff. Like, it's a story about a chief told by the descendants of this chief, who become the rulers of the Hawaiian kingdom. So of course he's going to be like just good at everything. But also one of the things is really point out, he's not the best at stuff, but what he's good at is finding the people, like the other kids that are the best at stuff, befriending them and having them as his followers. And he's always feeding his followers from his stepfather's food. And these are chiefly things. This is how you prove you're a chief, is by making sure that your followers are taken care of. And then at a certain point, he finds out from his mom who his father is, and the mom is like, go down and meet your dad. And he takes all his stepsons with him, and they have adventures on the way down. They meet more like a fast guy. There's a strong guy. It's like collecting. And he calls them, even though he's a kid, he calls them his sons. And he collects sons. He collects these followers. And when they get down to Waipio Valley, he's like, "Okay, you guys stay on the back behind me, because if this goes wrong, I'm definitely getting killed." Because he's a ruling chief with all these kapu. I'm gonna run through the guards, jump on his lap, wearing his lei niho palawa, and hope he recognizes me instead of killing me. And that's the plan. And if it goes poorly, you guys split. If it goes well, then we'll all be kind of taken care of, because I'm the son of Liloa. So he does it. He runs past the guards, jumps on the chief, and the chief is, about to like freak out and like, "Who's this kid who just ran on my lap?" And then he notices the leniho, and he's like, "Hey, where'd you get that? That's mine." And he says, "I'm Umi. I'm the son of Akahi and Liloa." And Liloa's like, "Oh, my long lost son." He's super happy. And then he's like, meet your brother, Hakao. Hakao is not happy about this. Now, Liloa has his wife, the woman that he has Hakao with is of high rank. Hakao is the senior line. Hakao is going to inherit rule, but Hakao does not want to share anything with anyone. In the books, and this is written by the descendants of Umi, Hakao is an absolute piece of crap. He's a horrible ruler, a horrible chief, a horrible son, just incredibly selfish, self-centered. And Umi, meanwhile, is sort of the dutiful son, the dutiful duty, dutiful son, the dutiful brother, going and like he is the backbone of the chief. He is going and making sure that everything is running properly. He's organizing the, you know, if there's large, it's called irrigation projects, anything like that. Like he's the one who's kind of taking care of those. And then when Liloa dies, he tells Hakao, "You will be the ruler," but he gives Kukailimoku, which is the war god, to Umi, and is basically saying the two of you have to work together, or else you will fall, you will fail. The computer is heating up, so I'm gonna move the mic a little bit away so it doesn't catch that noise. And as that's happening, yeah, Hakao basically what you'd expect. Liloa dies, Hakao takes over, and he treats Umi like crap. He treats all his father's advisors like crap. He treats his buddies well, but they're not doing anything. So Umi splits. He and all his followers go up to Hilo. Some of his father's advisors come up, and his father's advisors are like surprised to find him. They know where he is. They're surprised to find him. He shows them all the followers he has. He shows them his abilities, and they say, and he feeds them, and they're like, "Oh, well, thank you for feeding us. So, as a thank you, we will figure out a way for you to assassinate your brother and become chief." This has nothing to do with them being fed. It has everything to do with them thinking that Umi will be a better chief. So they go down. They tell Hakao to send all his men up into the forest to get feathers, because he's such a wonderful chief that he needs a brilliant new cape. And while everyone's gone, Umi's men come down, kill Hakao, and Umi is now chief. And it doesn't seem like too many people complain, because Hakao was not doing a very good job as chief. Moving on. So, a couple of generations later, now Umi is going to go through and he's going to conquer the island. He's going to, at one point, go to Maui and, like, kind of, like, try to get bits of Maui. And then there's going to be this constant back and forth between the Maui chiefs and the Hawaii Island chiefs, because, one, they're closely related. I mean, they're constantly intermarrying up and down the island chain. But the other thing is that Maui and the Big Island are two strong, powerful islands right next to each other. They're lush, they're green, they're full of people. And so there's constant back and forth. There's constant competition between these two islands, as well as constant movement of people back and forth, etc. So one of these people that's moving back and forth is this guy Alapai. He's a couple of generations after Umi. And when he's living with Kekaulike, who's his brother-in-law, right? He's a Kohala chief, but he's living on Maui with Kekaulike. And his uncle Keawe dies. When Keawe dies, Alapai moves back to the Big Island, right? So he moved to Maui to be with Kekaulike. He moves back with Kekaulike's approval and conquers, because all his cousins are weak. So he takes them out, and he becomes the ruler of Hawaii Island, and he takes two of his cousins, Keoa and Kalaniʻopuʻu, under his wing, right? So these are pretty prominent people he's taking under his wing. He's not just going to kill everybody else that could have inherited land, because those are all pretty close family. So he takes these two younger guys under his wing. He's now ruling the Big Island. And I mean, look at the size of this thing. The Big Island is the Big Island for a reason. There's so much resources. And if you rule the whole Big Island, you have a good chance of just being able to, you know, go in and just wreck house on everybody. If you can hold on to the Big Island. The thing is, holding on to the Big Island is hard, because you have all these Ka'u people down here who never listen to what you're saying. You know, the Hilo people and the Kona people are always scrapping. If you can hold everything together, you have an incredible resource base for attacking other islands. And that's exactly what's going to happen. Now, Alapai had been living with Kekaulike. Kekaulike is his brother-in-law, his mentor, etc. But once Alapai takes over the Big Island, Kekaulike is like, I could probably take out Alapai, and then I will rule Maui and the Big Island. So he attacks. Um, this is the pink one. He comes down. Right, red for Big Island, pink for Maui. Comes down, attacks, loses, flees, and on the way out, chops down all the coconut trees and beats up all, like, kills a bunch of people, the Makainana and Kauai. Chopping down the coconut trees, the coconut tree is a very phallic symbol. Cutting off the top of the coconut tree is sending a message to Alapa'i. Um, Alapa'i is not happy with any of this, so he gets all those Big Island forces together, attacks Maui. When he gets there, he has this huge fleet, the biggest fleet anyone's ever seen in Hawaii. Um, and and Kekaulike is dying, and he's like, "Oh, now that I'm dying, I feel really bad about all of this. Can we reconcile as family? And could you maybe not kill your cousins here, and let them continue to rule on Maui?" So that's what happens. Except Alapa'i has this huge army of young chiefs that were thirsty for vengeance and loot. They were looking to fight other. They were looking to loot, man. Especially in a battle against other prominent chiefs. Everybody goes to war with all their good stuff on. They're looking to, like, fight other chiefs and show their prominence, show their abilities, and loot the chiefs that they defeat. But they can't do that on Maui because Alapa'i agreed not to. However, they found out that the Oahu chiefs have come over to Molokai. Now, Alapa'i is going to take this as a reason to attack the Oahu chiefs. The Oahu chiefs are coming over from Molokai, or to Molokai, because they heard Kekaulike is dying and they're hoping to get a chance to try and attack Maui. However, Alapa'i is going to show up on Molokai and crush them because he has this huge Big Island army against an Oahu army. And they took them out. And then once they've done that, oh, I should add, right before they leave, that's when Kamehameha was born to Keoa. Keoa is his father. So this is around the time Kamehameha was born. More moving back and forth and attacking. I promise there's a reason we're going through over all of this. So they defeat the Oahu chiefs, and then they're like, now that the Oahu chiefs are defeated, when they're on Molokai, well, Oahu's kind of undefended, so we might as well go and take it out. They go over to Oahu, and then Peleioholani of Kauai shows up, because what Oahu chiefs are left are like, oh, we are screwed. We need a protector, and Kauai is a big island and hasn't been affected by any of this. Peleioholani is a strong chief. Bring Peleioholani, and maybe he can save us. So Peleioholani comes over and saves them. Now, Alapa'i, it's one thing to fight with the Oahu chiefs, even against Kekaulike. There's a reason. But against Peleioholani, look, it's another really big army, and do I want to risk all my men? Like, if we go head to head, both sides know there's going to be mass slaughter. So they have a little skirmish, fight, but they're not having the huge pitched battles. And at a certain point, they call in a genealogist. And now this is kind of, they find out that they're related. They know they're related. That's how chiefs are chiefs, is because they know, the Li are the ones who know their genealogies. That's what makes them chiefs. So they know how they're related. They know how they're connected. But they bring in a genealogist to find the strongest connections, and then to present them as, like, this is why you should stop fighting. So genealogy, even though genealogy is one of the things that led to Alapa'i going to the Big Island and fighting, right? Genealogy can lead you to war, because if you have a high genealogy, then you have an ability to go and compete for rule. But genealogy is also the thing that allows them to stop this fight, because they discover that the relatives, they go and hug each other, and even when they're hugging each other and embracing each other to show that there's no hard feelings, they're both making sure that they don't get both their hands under, or the other person doesn't get both their hands under in a double underhook to throw them. This is actually recorded in Kamakau. Alapa'i's advisor saying, like, make sure if you go in there for the hug, that you don't put yourself in a position where if he decides to throw you and kill you instead, you'll be defenseless. So make sure you go for basically an over and an under, then it's fair when you guys tussle. Or get both underhooks and take them out. So yeah, Alapa'i goes home. He's headed home, at least. However, while he was gone, the sons of Kekaulike started fighting Kamehameha Nui and Ka'uhi. Kamehameha Nui looks to Alapa'i for support. Ka'uhi then turns to Peleioholani for support. And then Alapa'i and Peleioholani, who had just avoided fighting on Oahu, are now going to battle again on Maui. And what ends up happening is they tussle a little bit. Ka'uhi is killed. Kamehameha Nui becomes the king of Maui. Very much dependent on Alapa'i for his rule. Peleioholani returns to Oahu, or returns to Kauai, and basically the deal seems to be that Alapa'i is gonna be allowed to have really heavy influence on Maui that Peleioholani doesn't, but Peleioholani is gonna rule Oahu and Kauai. Peleioholani is incredibly powerful, but Alapa'i still has the Big Island, and the Big Island and heavy influence on Maui is, yeah, that's just as good as having Oahu and Kauai. And why did we talk about all this? Oh my God! So the point is, by the time we get to Kamehameha, it's not like Kamehameha is the first one to decide, hey, I could put a huge fleet together and go and fight other people. No, it's always there. You have big, powerful chiefs that are somewhat dependent on war for political rule. They're gonna butt heads. Look at this continues on. Why are the U.S. and China butting heads? Why have we butted heads with the Soviet Union for so long? When you have powerful military forces, they're going to eyeball the other powerful military force and constantly be figuring out, hey, do I need to attack this person? Are they a threat to me? Could I take them out and take all their resources? It's always there. And this is what was happening before Kamehameha. He was born during an expedition for one of these big inter-island fights. So this is something that's always happening in Hawaiian history, right up until the time Kamehameha conquers all the islands, and then nobody's left to really push back on them. Okay, so that's all the moving back and forth. There's not going to be any testing. I'm not going to test you on that. Like, you will not have a question about go through all the steps of the conquest. But it's just to show that there are these sort of movements back and forth, and there's fighting, there's warfare, and there's pretty big forces going around the islands before Kamehameha is even born. Now, eventually, Alapa'i goes back to the Big Island, mostly stays on the Big Island, and eventually he gets kind of sick, gets old. And Kalaniʻopuʻu, who should have been the ruler, but was too young and wasn't able to fight back against Alapa'i, Kalaniʻopuʻu has been under Alapa'i's wing this whole time, and Kalaniʻopuʻu decides, hey, I'm the rightful heir of Keawe. I should take over. Alapa'i's old and weak. So he takes Ka'u. That's sort of where his family is Ka'u. Not to mention, the Ka'u people like to fight, man. Ka'u is for rebels. And this is true now and it's true then. At one point in the 80s, there was a house party. There's 2 cops in all of Ka'u. There was a house party. The cops went down there to bust up the house party, and they chased the cops all the way back to the police station on foot and smashed up the police car. All the cops on the Big Island had to go down to Ka'u because the Ka'u people just don't take it from anybody. Ka'u. So he now has Ka'u. Alapa'i dies. Keawe Opala has control of most of the rest of the island, and Kalaniʻopuʻu starts this campaign and just goes through, and he's conquering. He takes a lot of the rest of the island. He's remembered as Heali Punikawa. He is a chief that's consumed by war. That he's constantly, warfare is constantly on his mind. And meanwhile, that's just the Big Island. On Maui, you have Kahekili. So Kahekili he's a huge player for the early Kamehameha story. He's a son of Kekaulike. These guys are all related, right? So he's the nephew-in-law, I guess, he's related to Kalaniʻopuʻu. He's related to Alapa'i. He's the son of Kekaulike. His brother Kamehameha Nui was was an okay king. Kalaniʻōpuʻu is going to try and attack Kamehameha Nui a couple of times. It doesn't go that well. But Kahekili, when Kahekili takes over, um, dude, Kahekili is remembered as a badass. Um, this is Kahekili jumping off of a cliff. He has half his body tattooed, um, and like he was the thunder, right? Kahekili, Hekili, thunder. He's the thunder. He sort of blackens half of his body with tattoos to be the thunder. He had been a mentor and protector of Kahahana, future ruler of Oahu. That will come in prominent later. And he has this dedicated group of warriors around him that have also sort of tattooed themselves in half. That are just, has like a core of badasses. And he has all the resources of Maui, including Molokai and Lanai. So Kalaniʻōpuʻu is going to attack Kamehameha Nui a couple of times and fail. He's a chief that loves war, but he doesn't seem to be a chief that's terribly good at it. His main thing to go back is just get a lot of guys and send all the guys in there, right? Not that much for tactics or strategy, and it doesn't really work against Kamehameha Nui. It sure as hell isn't going to work against Kahekili. So he's going to attack Kahekili a few times. At one point, he attacks Kahekili and he gets like these 800 young Hawaii Island chiefs, and he trains them for like 2 years, and it's like his best fighters, his crack fighters. They land like down by Ma'alaya. So if Maui looks kind of like a head and a body, they land over here and they're going over here. They land, and he sends his crack troops ahead. He's like, you guys go get them, instead of like sending the whole army. Those guys go forward, and there's sand dunes all around Wailuku. They're in the middle of one of the sand dunes, between two sand dunes, and then all of a sudden, all the Maui chiefs like come over the side, and the Oahu chiefs pop up because they've Kahekili got kahahana to bring support. The Oahu chiefs surround them, and they kill everybody except for 2. They leave 2 to go back and send the message to Kalaniʻōpuʻu that his guys are wiped out. And after that, like, Kahekili just crushes Kalaniʻōpuʻu to the point that Kalaniʻōpuʻu wants to surrender. One of Kalaniʻōpuʻu's wives, his sort of favorite wife, is the sister of Kahekili. And he asked her, hey, would you go and ask your brother not to kill us all? Because we're losing this battle so bad. And she's like, no, because I'm an adult and I joined you in this mission, so I'm also dead. The only thing is he really likes our son, so send Kivala'o. So they send Kivala'o, their son, and all of Kahekili's guys bow down before Kivala'o. And all of Kalaniʻōpuʻu, like, they end the war basically by having Kivala'o walk through the battlefield, or walk by the battlefield. And then Kahekili says, oh yeah, no problem, I'll end the war. But just don't forget that I could have killed you. I could have killed you all. And Kalaniʻōpuʻu, he goes home, licks his wounds, comes back. The Big Island is able to hold Hana for a while, which is why Hana, in a really weird, was like part of the same district as like North Kohala in terms of voting for a long time. And Kalaniʻōpuʻu is going to be the ruling chief of the Big Island when Cook arrives, and he's actually going to be on Maui fighting against the Maui people. And his nephew, Keoa's son, Kamehameha, is this whole time establishing a name for himself as a warrior, and as a very strong warrior, and also good at getting support. The support of a lot of the older chiefs are backing Kamehameha in a lot of what he's doing. So the brief interlude, Captain Cook shows up, 1778, 1779. No relation, I should point out. There's, yes, Professor Cook, but no relation to Captain Cook. He's already an established sort of navigator and explorer. He speaks some Tahitian. He has some experience dealing with Polynesian peoples, but he gets cocky and he gets killed. There's a whole like series of books about like why was Captain Cook killed. Look, you show up on the Big Island, you try and attack the Big Island chiefs. You by kidnapping Kalaniʻopuʻu. They had good relationships at first, but he basically at a certain point the relationship soured. He tries to kidnap Kalaniʻopuʻu. He tried to kidnap the ruling chief of the Big Island in Kona, where the ruling chief of the Big Island has all his troops. And then he got killed. I mean, it's not really a mystery. Ironically, one of the best versions of this I've seen is the Drunk History one. Okay, now back to the stuff that actually matters. Like, Cook matters in that after Cook, you're going to have contact back and forth. But for this story, he's kind of a sidebar. Now you have Kahahana. This is where the Oahu people come in. So he's a son of an Ewa chief, right? They send him off to Maui. Woo! Goes off to Maui to be raised by Kahekili. 1771, Kumahana, who's the Oahu king, is run off by the chiefs by basically, I can't spell. Che-ifs. He's run off by the chiefs for being kind of incompetent and like both incompetent and overbearing. And they meet and they decide that Kahahana is going to be their king. Now he's 15 years old. He was raised on Maui. Why is he going to be the king of Oahu? Basically because all the chiefs of the different districts want to have their power and they don't want a strong king over them. So they want a weak king that they can manipulate. And they're like, this 15-year-old kid from Maui who has genealogy but no experience in rule, I think that's who we want. It was a bad choice. We'll see why. So Kahekili's like, that's great. You're going to go and rule Oahu. I love you so much. You're my adopted son almost. Yeah, go ahead. I just want two things. Give me Kualoa. No, I don't want the whole island, but give me Kualoa. Give me that district. And any ivory that washes up on Oahu. No big deal, right? And Kahahana's like, sure, you can have Kualoa. You can have all the ivory. When he gets to Oahu, the Oahu chiefs are like, just so you know, all your war gods are in Kualoa. So you gave up that. And all the ivory is used to make these leiniho. But that's basically the gifts of Kanaloa, and you've given up that. So you're going to start off basically having given Kahekili one of the most important parts of the island and the favor of Kanaloa, the god of the sea. So Kahahana backs out, and Kahekili says, that's fine, back out. But he remembers this. And so later on, he's going to, they're going to be allied with each other. Kahahana is going to send gifts to ambush the Alapa'i. That's the name of the force that Kalaniʻopuʻu put together that got wiped out. And later on, like Kahekili keeps asking about Kualoa, and eventually the Oahu chiefs convince Kahahana that he's going to have to fight Kahekili. That he's going to have to take Kualoa back and the ivory. Never give these things to Kahekili. And then Kahekili shows up and wipes him out. Kahekili, he knows Kahahana is weak. He knows the chiefs following him are not very supportive. He shows up and crushes Kahahana. Some of the Oahu chiefs and some of the Maui chiefs join in. They rebel. They assassinate one of Kahekili's chiefs after Kahekili establishes dominance over Oahu. Kahekili slaughters all the Oahu chiefs of Ewa and Kona. So this whole area, like where the school is, all the way down to like Diamond Head, wipes them out. Men, women, and children. Like Kahekili is vicious, and builds a house of their bones to remind the Oahu chiefs not to mess around. They do not mess around after that. And that's it. That's it for what we're looking at today. So basically, why are we looking at all this? One, this is what the political landscape is when Kamehameha takes over. This is what it looks like. This is what it's coming into. Kahekili is going to be his main opposition in terms of outer islands, and then on the Big Island, it's going to be other people connected to Kalaniʻopuʻu. Yeah, and that's it. The other thing we have this week is a group exercise. I've already assigned that out. It's a paper. It's already written up. I sent the documents to you. Go over those and go over them with your groups. And I will see you guys next week.